Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today we're going to discuss the Call of Cthulhu adventure, The Star on the Shore. Written by Ben Burns and published by Dark Cult Games, the scenario was released in 2017 after a successful Kickstarter campaign. Set in the 1920s, the adventure is sort of a sequel, more of a spin-off, to the venerable Cthulhu adventure, The Haunting. Although it's not necessary if keepers prefer not to run The Haunting as well, however, I'm a huge fan of The Haunting, and I'm going to post a link to my review of that at the end of this video. Not including maps, handouts, pre-generated characters, bonus adventure, The Star on the Shore comes in at a whopping 64 pages. They crammed a lot into this thing. There's also 10, count 'em, 10 pre-generated characters for players to use. However, the character occupations are all across the board, ranging from a doctor, private detective, a lounge singer, to a vagrant. I really don't know how well many of these would work as starting PCs in a detective-style adventure. Now, as backup PCs who they meet in town after the adventure has started, a keeper can work them in pretty easily. But as starting PCs, it's going to be kind of tricky to work some of these in. Now, I worked this module into our existing campaign, so I didn't use any of the pre-generated characters, so I can't really comment too much about them, but they are there if you want them. Now, as I said, the adventure is a detective-style adventure. The PCs are sent to a New England town to recover a stolen statue. It's a sandbox-style module, meaning that after the opening, there is no set path as to what the PCs could do. So they could do anything they want. They could uncover these leads, uncover some false leads, meet a huge cast of NPC characters, some friendly, some not, and uncover a vast conspiracy and finally face unspeakable horrors. It is wide open. However, being a sandbox, especially one so ambitious as this one, can be extremely difficult to run, and keepers will need to do a lot of prep work in order to keep this game running smoothly. There's also a few issues that keepers will need to be addressing before they're able to play it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my opinions and criticisms and suggestions as a game master who has successfully run this adventure.
And I'm Jack, the NPC. I'm going to give this to you from a player's side of things. And unlike him, who's just going to lament about paperwork and keeping organized and all that boring game master crap, I'm going to tell you that from a player's side, this was one of the best adventures that we have had in a long time. This thing was a freaking blast.
The adventure took us 2 long sessions, but keepers should probably prepare for it to take 3. Being a sandbox means that it's very difficult to guesstimate because the players can be pretty unpredictable, and they could either rush to the end without being fully prepared for it, or they could just spend a lot of time role-playing around town because there is a lot there to keep them busy. However, before we go any further, I'm going to be warning you that there will be spoilers. A lot of spoilers. So to the players in the audience, if you have any desire to experience and enjoy this adventure, please stop now. But send your game master this way because we got a lot more to talk about. Okay, let's chop this up. The Star on the Shore is a fun adventure with a whole lot to offer, and we had a ton of fun playing it. But there are some big problems and minor gripes that need to be addressed. The biggest hurdle is that it's a sandbox, and sandbox games are never ever easy. There is a massive cast of characters for GMs to juggle. Thankfully, the module color codes them if they're friendly or neutral or hostile, which does help. But flipping back and forth in the module for them during the game can be exhausting. So keepers might want to put them on note cards or use some other organization method to get to each one easily. There's also handouts. A ton of handouts. Over 20. You can cut 2 of them out if you don't run the optional secondary adventure Key to the Abyss, which I didn't run. More on that later. We also get a few floor plans. Not much, but better than none. We also get a ton of art, which as I always say in my reviews, I love lots of art. The style and quality of the art changes, which some reviewers have complained about, but that doesn't bother me as long as we have art. Before running the adventure, I read it cover to cover 3 times, and then once again before we did the second session. I also had a lot of notes. And because I feel that writing inside of a module is blasphemy, I printed out the PDF, which I then slathered in notes like the wall of some conspiracy theorist's home. While we're on the subject of the PDF, one complaint that I have is that the pages of the PDF are just images of text. You can't search for individual words to reference back and forth, or to look for some sort of particular passage that you remember reading but don't quite remember where it was, so searching the PDF is just close to impossible. For a game like this, I would have really appreciated a searchable PDF, preferably one with hyperlinks or something to make searching that much easier. The game begins in Boston, as the investigators are called to a crime scene. The module's intro is a bit clunky. Essentially, the Boston Museum has purchased the property of the Chapel of Contemplation from the haunting scenario. They've hired Dr. Jennings of the Darkwing Detectives to do the excavations.
You know, detectives, we don't make a lot of money, you see, so we also do things like construction and excavation on the side. At least that's my only guess here.
During the excavations, they discovered a hidden room with a strange statue inside. But then the statue was stolen and a guard was killed, so the Darkwing Detectives hired the PCs to get it back.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Aren't you guys detectives, the Darkwing Detective Agency? Why are you hiring us? We got a doctor, a lounge singer, and a vagrant. You guys got to be the worst detectives ever.
The pedestal that the statue was on has GPS coordinates on it that direct the PCs to Rockport, Massachusetts. One thing, though, and I'm not entirely sure on this, is if these were the actual numbers that Global Positioning used at the time. I think that they should have just called it latitude and longitude and not call it GPS, which technically it is, but the term GPS makes people think of satellites and other, non-1920s sort of things. Because of a recent falling star that was along the New England coast at the same coordinates, Dr. Jennings suspects that they're related. However, Jennings doesn't even tell the PCs about the murder unless they are able to make a successful psychology check, which again makes no sense at all unless he's just a complete dick or a terrible detective.
Well, that's what gets my vote. He's a dick. A private dick. It's a detective joke.
So what I did is I scrapped just about all of that, but I kept all the same information there. So in case any keepers might want to use this for their own games, let me kind of explain how I did the setup for our own. Our PCs live in Arkham, and they belong to an amateur astronomy club that operates out of the house of a very wealthy friend that has an observatory. A select group of them, mostly the PCs, started getting into astrology and the cult, and then that's what started them on all of their adventures. So this adventure began with the investigators at one of their astronomy club parties, where they witnessed the falling star, and they calculated where it landed using latitude and longitude. A couple days later, they were contacted by their trusty friend and fellow club member, Jack the NPC, who was contacting them about a certain job that he just got.
Okay, guys, here's the thing. A couple years ago, I worked this case, and in it, we found this burnt-out church that had a couple bodies that were still down in the basement. So after the case was over, I called the cops to let them know about the bodies. Doing my due diligence, that sort of thing. Anyway, since then, a museum has purchased the property, and while they were bulldozing it down, they discovered a room that I had missed, and there were some interesting things inside, if you get my meaning. So they had my number left over from when I had worked that case a few years ago, and they called me up. And this is when things start getting really weird. Anyway, there's been a murder and a theft, and there's a couple other things about this that make me think I might need a little bit of help on this one if you guys can help.
The PCs then traveled to Boston, where they got the rest of the information. The murder was not a secret at all, and then they walked in already knowing the coordinates for Rockport, Massachusetts, which they now coincide with the coordinates that are written on the statue, so they linked those two things together themselves. It worked much, much better for us, and all the information was still imparted. While they were there, there's also one more thing that the PCs could find.
Hey guys, check this out. I found this old postcard down here, and it's got that barn, that famous one in Rockport, the place we're about to go to. Anyway, I can't make out any of the words on it. They're all blurred and burned and whatnot. But at the very top, right here, I can see the name Gabriel. So it looks like it's addressed to Gabriel. And that's pretty cool and all because Gabriel's the villain, and this just gave us the villain's name. So, nice prop. But because it looks like it's addressed to Gabriel, who would send Gabriel a postcard of the town that Gabriel is living in, am I right? I mean, if it was written on the back, down at the bottom, like signed from Gabriel, like, hey, from Rockport, Gabriel, that would make complete sense. But the fact that it's on the top, addressed to Gabriel, this clue is kind of weird.
This clue is a bit clumsy. I nearly didn't include it, but decided to, and nothing ended up coming from it. The most important part of this entire meeting is that when the PCs leave, they see that a flock of crows is strangely watching them.
Oh, well, that's not creepy at all.
Keepers, remember to use these crows a lot. I had them pretty much following the PCs all around town for the entire adventure. The crows need to be a regular occurrence to keep the mood and the paranoia going. Speaking of crows, when the PCs travel to Rockport, which you can find here on the 7th edition Lovecraft Country map, if they decide to drive, they will be attacked by crows while on the road. It's a little adrenaline moment that can get the game going. The town itself is pretty cool. The module provides a player map, which I really appreciate. There's also a larger fold-out version of it in the book that you can tear out. However, I don't defile my books by tearing pages out, so I just printed out a large copy and placed that on the table, as well as printed out single sheet maps to give to each of my players so they could write notes on them, and I highly recommend you do that. The Keeper map has locations and numbers marked on it for the 40 locations around town, which is nice, but I have a few problems with it. First, the number of locations aren't in any real order. Some seem completely random. That makes finding locations extremely difficult to do in-game. Furthermore, the circles that they put around the numbers have these scalloped sides, which makes them even harder to read the tiny numbers when printed on my single-sheet Keeper map. I wish they just made them normal, smooth circles because they just made them harder to read during the game, and I couldn't find locations as quickly because of them. One trick that I strongly recommend is that when the players are exploring the map and learn of locations such as the upholstery shop, and they note that location on their map, tell them that that's location 33. Go ahead and tell them. That way, when they decide to return to the upholstery shop, they can say, I want to go back to the upholstery shop. That's location 33, by the way. That way I could flip through the book faster and get directly to the explanation of what's there, and we could keep the game going forward. And because once again, there's no logical order to what the location numbers are, and so you have to literally just flip through the book unless you just have the entire 40 locations memorized. Now, some keepers might not like to do that and let the players know what the location numbers are, as if it somehow lessens their immersion into the game. But to me, what lessens the immersion more is when the players have to constantly wait 5 minutes for me to search for the description for every single location over and over again. And I can't even search the PDF quickly because it's non-searchable. So trust me, go ahead and give your players what the location numbers are to give back to you in case they want to go back to them, because it'll make the game much, much faster. The other problem with the Keeper map is that the buildings with the stone plates atop them are not marked. Keepers will definitely need to mark those when they go to the lighthouse, so mark the locations on your map prior to the game. I also marked out where the churches were because, again, that was very important for when a player asks, hey, where are the churches? I could just quickly show them without having to flip through the book. A few things to note when they get to town. It is covered by a strange fog. Like the crows, remind the players throughout the adventure of the fog's presence. Also, mention that it is a low-lying, heavy fog. That way, when the PCs go to the lighthouse and see the plates atop the roofs of all the key buildings around town, the reason they can see them is because the fog is so low that the plates are above the fog line. So that way they don't kind of question later, hey, how did we see those from all that distance away? Also, in my game, I changed them from stone plates to recently polished metal mirrors, but that was just for me. You don't have to do that. Once the players arrive in town, they will need a few nudges to get them started. This can be a big problem in sandbox games, but it's easy to correct with a little bit of preparation. If they drive in, have them arrive at the pharmacy. Maybe make that a gas station too and they need to fill up. If they come by train, they'll arrive at the depot. Either way, there's copies of the papers there. If they don't stop at those locations, have the PCs find a newspaper at whatever the first place they stop at is. Maybe put it on a bench, have it sitting on the counter when they walk up to ask for directions, whatever, but make sure that you give them the newspaper. The newspaper will talk about the fog, the missing people, the falling star, and the boarding house where they can stay. Quick note, there is an error on the paper that says FDR was president in 1921. Minor detail that's worth a few laughs. I had crossed it out and wrote Warden G. Harding on it before I gave it to my players. The Woods House is the only boarding house in town that still has available rooms. Once the PCs arrive, there's a lot of plot hints that you can drop here to get the players started. First, have them meet the two boys. Say that they're playing on the tire swing outside. Maybe have the boys approach the car and ask questions about it if the PCs drove into town. Next, mention the art that is all over the house that Sarah picked up at the Art Association. I added a small wooden sculpture with a mythos origin, like a kind of a slightly incorrect elder sign, and if the PCs ask about it, she can tell them that no, that didn't come from the Art Association, that was made by Old Man Douglas, and he gave it to her. Next, I had Phyllis, the cook, ask the PCs if they could just please run to the butcher shop and pick up some lamb for them all to eat that evening. She'll give them money to pay for it, and she's going to say, oh, well, I don't have a car, and I hurt my ankle, and that's why I can't do it myself.
Wait a second. You want me to run errands for you? Okay, what type of boarding house is this where I pay you money to stay and in return... Wait, did you say you were going to cook lamb if I pick that up? Oh, yeah, of course. I'd love to pick up some lamb for you. Hey, since I'm going to be going out anyway and you hurt your ankle, why don't I just run to the pharmacy, maybe pick something else up for you? That way, I can go to 2 locations in this new town instead of just 1.
The addition of this little quest gives the PCs a reason to visit locations that they might not normally have visited and therefore never have seen. While they were at the butcher, I had the butcher tell them that Old Man Douglas, the local hunter, was going to be bringing some venison over later that evening, and if the PCs want some good venison, they should come by tomorrow and pick that up. He also went ahead and told them that if they want some nice liquor to go with their lamb that they just bought, that they should pay a visit to the Cape Ann Tool Company, and they can hook them up with some booze.
Well, you read my freaking mind. I would love some booze for tonight's meal. Thank you very much. Hey, and I tell you what, I'll be back tomorrow for some of that venison.
Now, of course, the butcher goes missing after the first time the PCs interact with him, and that's a very cool plot point that the module put in, but it never put in any reason for the PCs to visit the butcher. So keepers, I strongly suggest that you come up with some small little links or minor quests or ideas to get the players to even visit some of these 40 locations. It's just a little push to get the game going, and it worked beautifully for us. Once the PCs started visiting locations, it sort of chain reacted to where we suddenly had a large cast with a ton of clues and a lot for the PCs to work with, so that way they never felt stumped, or they never felt that they had no more leads to act on. But another suggestion that I offer is the Colonel. Definitely have the PCs see him walking in the streets with the deliberate paces as he's trying to figure out the path of the tunnels that he's discovered. The module only gives it a 10% chance of him being out anytime the PCs are there. I say either make that a 100% chance that he's out when the PCs are out during the daylight hours, or at least base it off of a luck roll. And then once you determine if he's out, have them roll spot checks to see if they see him kind of walking awkwardly through, counting all of his steps. Once the PCs have their first encounters with some of these people, they start interacting, and the beauty of this adventure really begins to shine. It's extremely detailed, and there is no shortage of leads for the players to find. However, I do have some suggestions in order to keep the game running from there. As the PCs look into the artists, they'll want to know where they're staying. In fact, every single one of my players at some point asked the question, like nobody else had, hey, where are the artists all staying at? So just choose 1 to 2 random unused locations on the map, mark them as locations 41 and 42, and say that they're either a flop house or a hostel or just abandoned buildings that they're all squatting in, because the PCs are going to ask. When the PCs visit the lighthouse, they will be caught in a flash storm. The incident is only described under Eddie Guy on page 42, but my players used Captain Street on page 48 to get to the lighthouses, so when they were going, it took me a while to search through the book to figure out where in the hell the description for the storm was. So just note it on your notes, and that way you can find it easily for whichever way the PCs decide to get to the lighthouses. The PCs will also talk to several people who are aware of the cult, and they will understandably ask those people, well, who's in the cult? Eventually, you're going to need to give them a name. Not everyone in town is going to be able to say, I don't really know, they always wear hoods, or it's just rumors that I hear. So, for example, in my game, when they ask Lump the Gravedigger who was in the cult, because he has seen them many times over the years going in and out of the tomb, he just went ahead and said, well, I know one of them is the sheriff. The same thing goes for when PCs learn of someone in town that they can trust. They're instinctively going to ask them if there's anyone else in town that they can trust. And while some of the NPCs do have a couple names listed next to them, you need to have names ready for everyone in town. So just keep a list of names ready that you can give out anytime that a PC is asked, hey, who else in this town can we trust about it? Now, That doesn't mean that they actually are trustworthy. They could still be cult members, but you need to have some names ready because the PCs are going to ask, and everyone who lives in this town should know at least one person that they consider trustworthy. Now, aside from the crows and the fog, keepers should always remember to use the dreams. Every night that the PCs stay in town, they will be plagued with strange, unusual dreams. Because the adventure is not linear, keepers might forget to do that. All of these elements are key to the game's mood and atmosphere.
And by mood and atmosphere, he means keep your players substantially freaked out and paranoid from the moment they see the crows outside the Chapel of Contemplation until the moment this adventure is done.
When the PCs begin exploring the tunnels, go ahead and note on your keeper map how deep the water is at each location. Remember, if the PCs go down into the tunnels, they are going to have soaked shoes and clothing, which will be a dead giveaway if the players didn't prepare beforehand. Maybe have some waders that are down at each of the locations that the cultists use. When they go down, they put on their waders so they can kind of trudge through 2 feet of water to get to the ceremony ring. So when the PCs go down there, they could find these waders and go, aha! But then, if there's any waders that are missing, the cultists might suddenly notice that and figure out that someone that's not supposed to be down there is down there. If the PCs make contact with Nashville Burton, the game is going to drastically change. Nash will be murdered in his home before the PCs arrive at his house, and since the police are in the cult, they're already going to be setting the PCs up to take the fall for it. From that moment forward, the PCs will be hunted by the cops who already knew that Nash was going to be murdered and when they should arrive because they're going to arrest the PCs for that murder. The module sort of skims past this, as if the PCs could just simply flee without being seen and no one will know about it. But the truth is that the police already would have known. That was the plan the whole time, and there's many credible witnesses that are going to be able to tell everyone in town how they saw the PCs enter the house and they suddenly heard a cry and some smashing stuff and then a scream. So the PCs are pretty screwed.
And remember, with the PCs getting chased through the nighttime foggy streets for a crime that they did not commit, this is film noir gold.
Also, remember to use Gabriel as an active villain. He and Shadows are keeping a close eye on the PCs with his crows. Now, crows can't get inside the buildings, so when the PCs are inside buildings, they should feel reasonably safe from them. However, Shadows can obscure herself in shadow, so she can follow them into buildings, and then you can mention every once in a while the shadows in the room seem to be moving strangely. On another note, I had that when the PCs actually met Shadows, her shadow moved independently from her, just like in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Eventually, the PCs will face the final confrontation. The cultists have summoned a star spawn, and depending on what the PCs do, it could escape from its prison and begin wreaking havoc. This thing is bad, bad news. It could easily wipe out the party. Hopefully the PCs have learned all the clues that they need to get rid of it without it having to be a toe-to-toe fight.
And in case any of you guys are wondering, we did not find the clues in time in order to banish it, so we ended up riding around in a boat, strapping sticks of dynamite to harpoons, and firing them out of harpoon guns at old Squidface. It was freaking awesome.
One final thing this adventure lacks is a sanity reward. Once the star spawn is banished, the cultists defeated, the deep ones slain, the prisoners freed, and the statues returned, players are going to need to be rewarded some sanity for all of those things. But there isn't a sanity reward in the adventure. So keepers, remember to reward your players with sanity for everything that they accomplish. Now, there is a second optional adventure in the book called Key to the Abyss, which the PCs have to remove a magic Revolutionary War cannonball from a church tower. I didn't run this adventure. First, it would have taken away the momentum of the primary game, partially because it requires that they leave town to do research. I didn't want that. But more importantly, I just don't like the adventure because it feels like a Mythos hoedown to me, and I'm not a big fan of those. However, the main adventure was a lot of fun, and my players had a great time with it, which is ultimately the entire point of gaming. Keepers will just need to put in a lot of pre-work to stay organized and work through all the awkward opening and be on their toes for a ton of improvisation as the game goes on. But once you do, The Star on the Shore is a very rewarding adventure.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you want to see some more of our reviews and videos, just hit that little subscribe button. Until next time, gamers, you have a great day. You know, that harpoon gun was freaking amazing. We should have one on every adventure.